In Aba City, a billionaire once lived behind high glass walls. His name was Henry Oak. Rich, feared, untouchable. But in that mansion also lived a woman nobody noticed. Her name was Amara. She was the maid, quiet, gentle, almost invisible. One who worked all day and disappeared every evening before the sun went down. Always carrying 2 nylon bags. One filled with food, the other filled with papers. For a long time, Henry ignored her. But one evening, curiosity gripped him stronger than pride. He followed her, and what he discovered that night didn't just surprise him, it broke him, and slowly it remade him. This is not just a tale of a billionaire and his maid. It is a story of sacrifice, of dignity, of love, and of seeing someone not with your eyes but with your heart. Before we begin, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the journey. And in the comments, tell us the country you are watching from. This story is already traveling far across cities, across nations, and we are reading every single one of your words. In Aba City, almost everyone knew the name Henry Oak. He was feared, respected, and envied. A hotel tycoon with mansions spread across the southeast, but the jewel of them all was his luxury home near the Gulf Estate. The kind of house that shone with glass and marble, guarded with tall gates that whispered wealth. But in that house also lived a girl most people never noticed. Her name was Amara Okoye. Amara the maid. She was quiet, too quiet, always early, always neat. The same 2 gowns every week, the same soft slippers that looked ready to snap apart. She barely spoke unless someone asked her something directly. She avoided people's eyes, bowed slightly when spoken to, and moved through the mansion like a shadow. Her life looked simple: wash, clean, cook, then vanish. But Henry noticed something different. Every evening Amara would leave by sundown, and she never left empty-handed. She always carried 2 nylon bags, one full of food, the other stuffed with papers. And that made Henry suspicious. One evening at exactly 5:45 p.m, Henry paused in the hallway and saw her again at the door, adjusting the bags. "Amara," he called firmly. She jumped slightly, then turned quickly, eyes lowered. "Yes, sir." "You're leaving already?" "Yes, sir, I finished everything." Henry's gaze fell on the bags. "What's inside?" Her grip tightened. "Some food and some documents, sir." He frowned. "Documents, what kind?" Her voice dropped low. "It's personal, sir." Henry studied her. His instincts, sharp from years of business wars, whispered that this girl was hiding something. He leaned against the doorframe. "You leave early every single day. Why?" Amara's reply was simple. No excuses, no stories. "Yes, sir." That was it. She lifted her chin, pulled her old slippers over the polished tiles, and walked out of the mansion gate. Bag straps tight against her body, steps quick, posture firm. Henry stood at the door long after she left. That night, contracts waited for him. Memos piled his desk. Guests expected him at a dinner party, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her. Amara, with her nylon bags and her quiet walk. By midnight, Henry could not resist anymore. He pulled up her file. Amara Okoye, age 25, hired through an agency, no next of kin written, no emergency contact, no family details, no education history, just basic records too simple for a real life. Henry pressed the folder shut and muttered under his breath, "Who are you, Amara?" Outside, Aba City had gone quiet, but in his chest, Henry's curiosity roared like a restless drum. For the first time in many years, he decided, tomorrow, instead of waiting, he would follow her. The next evening, Henry drove himself. No driver, no bodyguards. He wore a plain cap and sat behind the tinted glass of his Toyota SUV. His eyes never left the gate as he waited. At 5:55 p.m, there she was. Amara, old slippers, worn gown, and those same 2 nylon bags. She locked the gate gently, then hurried out. Henry started his car and followed. She didn't take a keek, didn't stop to buy anything. She walked steadily through the crowded Aba roads, past the roasted corn smoke, past hawkers shouting gala, coke, suya, and through the madness of bus horns, always straight, never slowing down. Finally, she boarded a rusty yellow bus. The conductor shouted Ogba Hill straight, Ogba Hill, and slapped the side of the door. Amara squeezed inside. Henry followed in silence. The bus rolled into a part of Aba Henry hadn't visited in years. zinc rooftops leaning against each other, muddied gutters running along the road, shouts of children chasing tires. At last Amara stepped down. She crossed the road, turned into a narrow street and stopped before a low gate. Henry slowed his car, eyes lifting to a cracked board above the entrance. It read, St. Teresa Motherless Barbie's Home. He froze. Through the gate he saw children running, their voices sharp, their laughter raw, and then Amara entered. At once the children swarmed her little frame. They tugged at her dress, calling her Auntie Amara. Auntie Amara. She bent low, hugging them, pulling bread from her bag, handing out sachets of water, wiping sticky mouths, her face wide with a smile Henry had never seen. Inside his car, Henry gripped the wheel hard. The girl who washed his dishes in silence was laughing, glowing, alive in the middle of abandoned children. And suddenly Henry felt something shift inside his chest. This was no ordinary maid. Amara was a woman living a double life. And Henry Oak, Aba's richest cold-hearted billionaire, knew in that moment. He had just stepped into a story that would change him forever. Even after years of building an empire, Henry Oak had never felt his chest this tight. He sat in the driver's seat of his car, staring through the half-open gate of the St. Teresa Motherless Barbie's home. It was just a plain compound, walls cracked and gate rusted, but the laughter inside felt like a different world. And in the middle of that world was Amara. She knelt on the rough ground in her old brown gown, one bag open beside her. From inside she pulled out bread, sachet water, even small biscuits. With her soft hands she shared to the children one by one. "Eat slowly, China," she said, smiling. "Don't rush, Maury will come tomorrow." The little girl, her face streaked with dust, clutched the bread with both hands. Her small eyes shone as if Amara's words were gold. "Thank you, Auntie Amara," the girl whispered. Henry swallowed hard, a lump rose in his throat. This warmth was not the Amara he knew in his mansion. There she was quiet, barely speaking. But here she was fire, light. The second nylon bag rattled open. Papers, worn exercise books and sheets of lined paper. Amara pulled them out and began to arrange the older children on wooden benches under a tree. "Sit down, everyone," she said softly. "Today we will learn how to spell your names." The children clapped, some laughing, some shy. Henry's chest grew heavier as he leaned further behind his steering wheel. "Chindu," Amara called. "How do you spell your name?" The boy scratched his head. "Chi. Amara chuckled gently, touched his shoulder and guided his finger across the paper. "Good, don't fear, take it slowly. Chi, do you say it with me?" The boy repeated, lips stumbling, but his face shone as if he had been handed treasure. Henry's hands gripped the leather of his wheel. He whispered to himself, almost broken. So she's teaching them, using her tiny salary to do this. His mind played the images side by side. His mansion's pantry, overflowing with food he never touched. Rooms full of shoes, suits, ties he had forgotten he owned. And this girl, this maid, giving her crumbs to children who had nothing. For the first time in years, Henry felt shame burn in him. The teaching went on. The children laughed loudly when one boy wrote his name with the letters backward. Amara laughed with them, but she never mocked him. She leaned close and said with the patience of a mother, "Try again, little one. Nobody is too small to learn twice." The boy smiled wide and held the paper like a trophy. Henry's lip trembled. He clenched his jaw quickly, furious with the unfamiliar feeling. A billionaire does not cry in his car, but Amara had shaken something buried inside him. When the lesson ended, she gathered them and they sang a short hymn. "We are never alone, God is here with us." Their voices cracked, but their joy filled the air completely. Then Amara stood and gave them what was left of her food bag. A motherless boy, no older than 5, clung to her leg and whispered loudly enough for Henry to hear. "Auntie, will you come tomorrow again?" She bent low, kissed his forehead. "Every day, my child, until you can stand tall." Henry turned his face away, his teeth gritting painfully. No one in Aba City had ever spoken to him with that much love. Not his managers, not his board members, not even some of his family. Amara gave out of nothing. He, Henry, gave out of excess. Maybe that was the difference. As she turned to leave, Henry panicked slightly. He ducked into his seat. She passed the gate, walking swiftly back into the street, not even glancing around. Silence filled the SUV. Finally, Henry leaned back, exhaled and muttered, This woman, she's living a life I never saw. His phone buzzed violently on the dashboard. His father's name flashed on the screen, Chief Oak. Henry almost didn't pick up, but he did. Henry, his father's voice boomed. You missed the family dinner again. I was busy, Henry replied coolly, starting his engine. Busy, the old man barked. When will you stop chasing shadows in a bar? Board members are waiting, investors are waiting, and you hiding from your own family. Henry's lips nearly curved into irony. If his father only knew what shadow he was chasing. Good night, Papa, he whispered, and cut the call before his father could reply. As he drove off into the night, his thoughts refused to leave Amara's face. That smile when the children called her name, the fire in her eyes when she taught them, the calm dignity in her voice when she gave away her little food. For the rest of that night, Henry didn't sleep. He sat silently in his study, staring at the soft lamplight. Amara's laughter with the children rang like music in his mind. The papers on his desk blurred. His own wealth, his own empire felt suddenly pale. The truth hit him hard. His life was wide, but it was not deep. Somehow this maid Amara had both depth and light. She carried purpose, and purpose was something money had never bought him. In the quiet of the early morning, Henry whispered to himself, I must know more, I must understand her. This is only the beginning. Henry barely slept that night. He sat in the study of his vast Aba mansion, surrounded by papers worth millions, but none of them seemed important anymore. His mind refused to let go of the picture of Amara at the motherless Barbie's home. Her small hands wiping dirty faces. Her voice, steady, warm, teaching children how to write their names. The laughter, the clapping, the gratitude in the children's eyes. By morning, as birds scattered noisily across the Gulf estate sky, Henry had already decided. He could no longer pretend he hadn't seen her. At exactly 7:00 a.m., Amara walked quietly into the dining room with his breakfast tray. Her slippers whispered against the marble floor as she lowered her eyes like she always did. A steaming cup of tea, yam and egg sauce. She set them carefully in front of him and stepped back. Good morning, sir, she murmured. Henry stared at her for a long time. Then, instead of picking up his fork, he said quietly, sit down. Amara froze, she blinked uncertain, sir. Henry's tone softened, sit down, Amara. Slowly, nervously, she lowered herself into the chair opposite him. Her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed firmly on the tablecloth. Henry let the silence drag before he finally spoke. I followed you yesterday. Her head snapped up, eyes wide, filled with sudden fear. Sir, her lips trembled. Sir, I wasn't stealing. I swear I didn't take anything from this house. Please believe me, sir, I would never. Henry lifted his hand gently. Relax, I know I didn't see you stealing. She blinked, stunned. Then why did you follow me? Henry leaned forward, his voice low but sure. Because I had to understand. Because every evening you leave my house with those old bags as if you have a secret life. And yesterday, Amara, I saw part of it. I saw you at St. Teresa's. At the mention of the home, Amara gasped softly. Her face turned pale, shame flickering in her eyes. I saw you teaching those children, Henry continued quietly. I saw you feeding them, taking care of them, giving them food you clearly saved from this house, talking to them with love. Her lips parted, but no words came. Henry's own voice faltered for the first time. Why, Amara, why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you ask for help? A heavy silence filled the large dining hall. Then slowly, Amara lifted her face, tears shimmering in her eyes. Her voice was small, but it carried weight. My parents died when I was young, she began. I had no brothers, no sisters, no family. I grew up partly in that home, the same St. Teresa's you saw yesterday. Henry's heart jolted. The nuns there fed me, clothed me. They taught me not to feel dirty because I had no family. When I finally grew old enough, I left and worked as a cleaner, then eventually as a maid. But that home, Amara's voice cracked. That home gave me life when I had nothing, so how could I turn my back on the children who live there today? A single tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it quickly, ashamed. Henry bit his lip, fighting emotions he was not used to feeling. So all this time, your evenings, your bags, the food. Yes, she cut in softly. Every little I could gather, I carried it there. The documents you saw, they are schoolwork pages, alphabet charts, even old applications for donors. I can't do much with my salary, but at least I can give my hands, my time, my heart." She dropped her gaze again, voice a whisper now. "I didn't mean for you to see it, sir. I didn't want pity. I didn't want interference. I only wanted to serve." Henry sat frozen, his meal untouched. For years he had dined with kings, sealed contracts worth billions, yet nothing had struck him the way this girl's trembling words did. Finally, he inhaled deeply. "Amara, do you even realize what you're doing? You've built more legacy in secret than most men with wealth. Those children, you're giving them hope." She shook her head quickly. "It's not enough, I can't do enough. There are too many. Some nights the Barbies sleep hungry. Some days the children faint in class. I see their faces and her voice cracked. I can't walk away." Henry's throat tightened. He almost reached for her hand but stopped himself. Instead, he said firmly, "You should have asked me. With what I have, I could multiply your work." Immediately she looked up, alarm in her eyes. "No." Henry frowned. "No." She pressed her lips tight, then spoke softly but firmly. "I know how it works for people like me. The rich throw money, then they also take over. They decide what happens, they take the glory, they erase the heart. I don't want that. The home is not my ego. It is my promise. If it grows, it must still carry love. It must not lose itself." Henry leaned back in his chair, stunned by her firmness. For the first time, a maid had looked him in the eye and told him no. Silence dropped heavy between them. Clock ticks echoed faintly in the room. Then Henry smiled faintly, a small, almost bitter smile. "You think I only know how to buy things, Amara. Maybe you are right. But tell me, what if this time I don't just want to buy? What if I want to learn from you?" Her breath caught. She blinked fast, unable to process his words. Henry's voice grew quieter, full of something raw. "For years, I've lived like a shadow, pretending power is enough. And one evening, I followed you out of suspicion. But now I can't turn back. You've made me see a world I ignored. And Amara, it frightens me how much I admire you for it." Her eyes filled again, but this time her tears did not fall from shame. They shimmered from something else, something that felt like dignity. Before she could speak, Henry placed his spoon aside and rose. "Eat if you want," he said softly. "But know this, Amara, I will not stop until I understand everything about you." He walked out of the dining hall, his footsteps heavy against the silence, leaving Amara shaking in her seat. She lowered her face into her palms. For years she had carried the children's burden alone. For years she had believed no rich man could ever understand. But now things were changing. Her chest beat fast with both fear and hope. For Henry Oak, the confrontation had only deepened the mystery. For Amara, it had opened the door to a storm she was not ready for. And in that storm waited not only children and dreams, but the crushing judgment of Henry's family, his parents, Chief and Madam Oak, who would never accept a maid in their son's heart. The story had only just begun. The morning sun burned bright over Abbas City, its light spilling across the high walls of the Oak mansion. But for Henry, the warmth did nothing. His chest still carried the weight of the long conversation with Amara. Her secret, her strength, her refusal to seek pity had unsettled him heavily. For the first time in years, Henry was late to the office. He sat in silence in his lounge chair, staring at the untouched breakfast in front of him. His assistant called twice. Meetings, contracts, signatures were waiting, but Henry could not move. By mid-morning, a deep, familiar voice echoed through the mansion gates. Chief Oak, his father, had arrived. Tall, strong, dressed in a flowing white senator outfit, the old man still carried the authority of his heyday. Right behind him came Madam Oak, Henry's mother. Diamond earrings sparkled against her headscarf, her gaze sharp, her lips set in their usual disapproving line. The mansion seemed to shrink whenever they entered. "Henry," his father's deep voice carried from the hallway. "Why is this house so silent? Since when did my son start living inside a graveyard?" Henry forced a smile and greeted them politely. "Papa, Mama, you didn't tell me you were coming." Chief Oak frowned. "I should tell you before visiting my own son. Or are you hiding something inside this your castle?" It was meant as a joke, but his words pressed heavier than he knew. Madam Oak set down her handbag and glanced around. "At least this place is clean. I hope you're eating well. Don't tell me you're still depending on that maid of yours. What's her name again? Amarachi." "Amara," Henry corrected quietly. At the mention of her name, Madam Oak sniffed loudly, her eyes narrowing. That one, thin face, old slippers, always sneaking out like a thief after dark." Henry sat up instantly, his voice firm. Mama, enough. Amara is hardworking, respectful. She has kept this house in order without complaint. But Chief Oak cut in with a booming laugh. So what? Is it not her job? You pay her salary and she does her duty. End of story. Don't tell me this small maid has found a way to impress you, Henry. The words strung, not because they mocked Amara, but because they uncovered the truth. She had impressed him, more than anyone in years. Henry swallowed hard and looked away. Madam Oak's tone sharpened. Henry, listen to me very carefully. You are 40 years old. Your mates are settling down with women of class, daughters of senators and governors, building alliances to strengthen their business power. And you are sitting here defending a maid. Harbour, Henry. Her words poured out like acid. Unknown to them, Amara stood quietly in the corridor holding a pile of folded laundry. She had frozen in place when Madam Oak entered. Every word from the madam's lips stabbed deeper into her heart. Old slippers, maid, thief. The clothes in her hands grew heavy. Her breath caught, her chest hurting. She wanted to drop them, but her pride kept her still. Chief Oak lowered himself into the armchair, his voice sharp but slower now. Son, let me remind you, we the Oaks are not ordinary people. We are not raising hotels and estates so you can embarrass us. A maid from the street cannot be linked to us, no matter how harmless she looks. Henry's jaw clenched. His father's voice filled the room with a judgment that left no space for his thoughts. But then he heard his own heart pounding. And rising against that pounding came Amara's voice from yesterday. It is not my ego. It is my promise. If it grows, it must still carry love. Suddenly, Henry stood, his voice steady but cold. Papa, Mama, I don't care about alliances. I don't care about appearances. If the woman who cooks my meal has more dignity than the daughters of senators, then it is the senators' daughters who should be ashamed. The words landed like thunder. His parents gaped at him. For years Henry had feared no man in business, but he rarely stood this sharply against his parents. Madam Oak's mouth trembled in disbelief. Henry, what are you saying? Don't tell me you cannot mean you care for that maid. Henry answered slowly, each word calm but weighty. I respect her. Silence, thick, dry silence. Amara, still frozen in the corridor, felt tears sting her eyes. No one had ever defended her before. Yet at that same moment, fear crawled up her throat. Because respect from Henry Oak came at a price. It meant facing his parents' wrath. She turned quickly before anyone saw her and ran back into the kitchen, her chest pounding. She pressed her palms over her face. She had survived being looked down on before, but not like this. Not when Henry himself seemed ready to fight for her. By noon, Chief and Madam Oak stormed out of the mansion, their anger trailing in the sound of the slammed car doors. Henry sat down, his chest heaving quietly. He poured himself water but hardly tasted it. He whispered into the silence, half to himself, half to the universe. It's too late now. I can't unsee Amara. I can't unhear what I've heard. And no matter what Papa or Mama think, I won't turn away from her. But in the kitchen, Amara packed her bags quietly. The echoes of Madam Oak's words rang cruelly in her ears. A maid from the street cannot be linked to us. Her heart whispered to her, stay strong, Amara. But her dignity shouted louder, perhaps it is time to leave before you bring him shame. Her hands trembled at the thought. Would Henry even understand? Would he stop her, or would he let her go? The storm had begun, and Amara felt she could not withstand both poverty and the fire of the Oak family. One way or another, a choice was coming. The mansion felt different after Chief and Madam Oak's visit. The air was heavier, the silence sharper. Henry could feel it when he walked into the lounge that night. The house, usually filled with the faint clatter of Amara's chores, had grown too quiet. He glanced toward the kitchen, expecting to hear her voice humming softly to herself, but the space was still. A deep wave of unease washed over him. When finally Amara stepped into the room, she was not holding her usual cleaning bucket. Instead, her arms carried a folded white envelope. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried a storm. Henry immediately knew. What is that? He asked steadily, his eyes narrowing. Amara's lips trembled, but she placed the envelope on the table between them. My resignation letter, sir, 2 weeks' notice. The words hit Henry like stones. For a moment, the powerful businessman who had silenced governors and won courtrooms of investors felt powerless in front of this small, gentle woman. He stood sharply, his voice deeper. You're leaving, why? Amara held her ground, even though her hands shook. Because I cannot stay where I'm not wanted. Your parents already look at me like dirt, sir. They believe I am beneath you, and they are right in a way. I am just a maid." Henry's chest swelled with anger. "Don't call yourself just a maid. I've seen the lives you touch in that home, Amara. I've watched you turn nothing into hope. You carry more dignity than most of Abaz's so-called madams." Tears threatened her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Even if you say it, even if you believe it, your parents don't, and I cannot be the reason they fight with you. I cannot become the shame pointed at your house, so before it gets worse, I must go." Henry stepped closer, his tone suddenly softer, desperate. "Amara, do you think I care what they think? Let them hate, let them shout. I know what I saw in you, and I cannot unsee it." She shook her head firmly. "Respect is one thing, sir, but war with your family, that is too heavy a price for anyone, even for me." Her voice broke at the last words, and she looked away quickly. Henry's hand twitched, aching to reach out, but his pride held it still. "So that's it," he whispered. "After all I said to you, after everything you've shown me, you will simply turn your back and walk away." Amara's answer came soft, wounded, but firm. "Leaving you does not mean leaving what I believe. The children need me. They depend on me more than anyone else. At least there I am not an embarrassment. At least there every hand stretched to me is grateful. Sir, I belong with them." The way she said sir cut him like a blade. It felt like distance, like a wall being rebuilt brick by brick between them. The room grew painfully silent. Henry turned slowly, his eyes closed for a second. "So you've chosen, even if I am ready to fight, you are not." Amara's tears fell this time. She nodded slowly. "Yes, please sir, don't make this harder than it already is." Henry stood frozen, his fists clenched. Every part of him wanted to roar in anger, to order her, to use the power he had always used to bend people to his will. But deep inside he knew, Amara was not someone you could bend. That was exactly why he admired her. And that was exactly why letting her go felt like breaking his own chest open. Finally, in a low whisper, he said, "If you must go, go. But know this, Amara, I will not forget you. Not tomorrow, not ever." She bowed her head, unable to find any reply. When she left the lounge that night, Henry dropped heavily into the sofa. His hands buried into his hair, his whole frame trembling. For all the wealth he had stacked, all the respect his name carried, Henry Oak realized he could not control this moment. And for Amara, locking her small room door in the servants' quarters, her heart pounded. She pressed her head against the wooden door and cried silently, not because she wanted to go, but because staying felt impossible. For the next 2 weeks, the mansion moved like a house carrying a wound. Amara still performed her duties. She still cooked Henry's tea, still swept the marble floors, still watered the plants. But now every glance they shared felt heavy with unsaid words. He wanted to tell her he needed her, but the pride on his lips refused. She wanted to tell him she wished she could stay, but fear gripped her tongue. Days passed like shadows, moving slowly, painfully across the walls. At night, Henry found himself wandering the halls, staring at doors she had just closed, listening for the soft sound of her slippers across the tiles. And every morning he sat at the dining table, pretending to review business notes, while what he really wanted was to stop her from taking the last bite of his world away. On her final evening before departure, Amara entered quietly with the dinner tray. Henry sat, tense and silent. The scent of jollof rice filled the air, but neither touched the food. Finally, Amara lowered her gaze and spoke, her voice a whisper. "Thank you, sir, for everything. You treated me better than most would. I will not forget it." Henry couldn't take it anymore. He pushed his chair back suddenly, his eyes burning. "Amara, don't say thank you like this is the end of your story. Your story is bigger than this house, bigger than my parents' insults, bigger than your broken slippers, and I don't want to watch you go out of my life like dust in the wind." Her eyes glistened, but she bowed again, her words almost breaking. "Sometimes, sir, loving something quietly means letting it go." And then she turned, her back straight, her steps steady, just as she had always walked when leaving the mansion. Henry sat in silence, every muscle in his body stiff. His throat dry, his chest heavy, he whispered only one sentence to the empty room. "You can leave this house, Amara, but you cannot leave my heart." Outside, Aba City's night buzzed with the cries of hawkers and the rumble of passing buses. But inside the mansion, silence roared louder than thunder. The rift was complete. But unknown to both, destiny had not finished with them. The day Amara left the mansion, silence swallowed the house whole. Henry stood by the tall iron gate as she walked out for the last time. She carried a single bag on her shoulder, her head high, her pace steady. Not once did she look back. The guards glanced at their ogre nervously, expecting him to order her back, to shout, to do something. But Henry only tightened his jaw and jammed his hands into his pockets. His powerful voice, the same voice that had commanded boardrooms, failed him in that moment. The footsteps of Amara Okoi faded into the busy noise of a bar, hawkers calling out guguru, groundnut, keeks rattling on muddy roads. And when she disappeared into the chaos, Henry felt his chest split open like a cracked drum. That evening the mansion felt like a tomb. The sound of slippers brushing over marble tiles was gone. The smell of her simple cooking was gone. Even the soft way she closed doors was gone. Henry sat in the study with files spread out in front of him, but he could not see the numbers. He kept hearing children's laughter at St. Teresa's. The way Amara's voice carried hope when she said, "Nobody is too small to learn twice." For 2 weeks he tried to bury himself in work. He signed contracts, met politicians, hosted elite parties. His name carried its same force, but inside an emptiness screamed. Wealth filled every corner of his mansion, but it could not fill the quiet she had left behind. Sometimes, in the lonely hours of early morning, Henry found himself walking to the servant quarters, the little room Amara used to call hers. It was bare now, stripped clean. But on the table, left behind by mistake, lay a framed picture of a woman with soft eyes. Her mother. Henry would stare at that photo for long minutes, then leave, whispering to himself, "Amara, I let you go, but I can't stop following you in my heart." The world outside remained loud with a Baz business noise. Traffic jams, Araria market traders shouting, children running with kites. But for Henry, a hush remained inside. Then, one Thursday afternoon, as the sun burned hot against the whitewashed mansion walls, a guard walked to his study with an envelope. "Ogre, dem drop this for gate." Henry frowned, opened it. Inside was a neatly folded cream card, handwritten. "You are warmly invited to the St. Teresa Motherless Barbies, home annual fundraiser and culture night. Director Amara Okoi." Henry froze. His name had not been spoken in her house since she left, yet here it was written in her delicate handwriting. He read the card 3 times, his eyes tracing her name each time. Amara. Suddenly, the emptiness that had been choking him turned into a surge of resolve. He would go. The following Saturday night, Aba City buzzed louder than usual. The streets near St. Teresa glowed dimly with lanterns strung between cracked zinc poles. Neighbors gathered outside with excited chatter. Children raced barefoot through the dusty ground. The compound gate had been freshly painted a warm blue for the occasion. Henry arrived in a simple grey suit without his driver, without his usual parade of bodyguards. He stepped out quietly into the night air. For once, he did not want to enter as the billionaire Henry Oak. Tonight, he wanted to stand as just a man. And when he walked into the courtyard, his breath caught. The rusted compound had transformed. Bright cloths hung across the walls. Wooden benches overflowed with people, mothers with Barbies strapped on their backs, old men in faded wrappers, young boys in oversized shirts. Everyone looked expectant. And in the middle of it all was Amara. She wore a long cream dress, plain but graceful. Her hair wrapped neatly in a scarf, her eyes alive, her smile warm. She moved between guests with trays of groundnut, greeting children, adjusting lanterns, holding the microphone with confidence. Henry's chest clenched. He had seen her as a maid, as a teacher, as a mother to children not her own. But tonight she looked like something he had no word for, a leader. The program began. A little girl came forward shyly, holding a small notebook. "My name is Ada," she said, her voice quaking. "I used to be afraid to speak, but Auntie Amara made me believe my voice matters, so tonight I will read." And slowly, with stammering but steady words, the girl read a short poem about light in darkness. The crowd clapped loudly, whistles piercing the air. Henry felt his throat catch as he clapped too, his palms burning with conviction. Another speaker followed, an old man, Papa Ekin, who had lived near the home. He raised his shaking hands. "Before we met her, these children had nothing. But Amara, she gave them food to eat, school notes to write, dignity to stand with. To us, she is not a maid. She is hope clothed in woman's skin." The cheer that followed rolled like thunder. Henry closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, tears rolled freely down his cheeks. Then came the moment. The host lifted the microphone high. "Please welcome our founder, the one who built this small dream from her small salary, Miss Amara Okoi." The courtyard erupted. Children jumped to their feet, clapping, shouting her name, Auntie Amara, Auntie Amara. She stepped forward. Her voice, when it rang out, was steady. They once told me people like me should only clean floors and vanish before sundown, but I learned that even the one carrying crumbs can feed nations if her heart is true. Her eyes swept lightly over the crowd. Then they found Henry's. For a moment her breath caught. Then a small, private smile sparked across her lips, a smile that said, "You came." Henry's chest swelled. Amara lifted the microphone again. "Everything you see tonight, it is not because I am special. It is because I was seen. For years I was invisible, but someone looked at me not as a maid, not as small, but as a woman carrying purpose. That single glance gave me courage to stand here, and for that I am grateful." The audience clapped again, unaware of who her words pointed to, but Henry knew. His heart shook inside him. The fundraiser ended with songs, drumbeats, and children dancing happily under the lantern light. Guests donated. It wasn't much, but the energy was everything. By the time the crowd began to thin, Henry stayed at the back, his tall frame hidden in shadows. He didn't move, just watched her. Amara moving, laughing, gathering cups, hugging children. Still the same maid who once scrubbed his kitchen sink, yet now glowing as if the whole city leaned on her shoulders. Finally, she turned, her eyes finding him. She walked straight over until she stood just before him. "You came," she said softly, almost like a question and an answer at the same time. Henry's lips curved faintly. "I had to." For a long moment they stood there. The night hummed with drums and laughter behind them, but between them was a silence so thick it carried more weight than words. Then Amara broke it gently. "I didn't invite you because you are Henry Oak, the billionaire. I invited you because somehow, against everything, you saw me." Henry's reply was low but sure, "And I will never stop." The spark of something deeper flickered between them, but both knew the fight ahead was not over. Chief and Madam Oak would not rest, society would not rest. But tonight, standing under paper lanterns and the songs of children, both Henry and Amara knew. The war had begun to shift in their favor. The Monday morning after the fundraiser, Aba City bustled as usual. Araria market women shouted over tomatoes, Okrika traders bellowed prices, motorcyclists swerved recklessly. But inside the Oak mansion, the air was tense, heavy, bitter. Henry sat in his study, reviewing the notes from the fundraiser, pledges from donors, a long list of children admitted into the home, and Amara's handwritten "thank you" etched at the bottom of the program sheet. His fingers lingered on her name, Amara Okoye. A faint knock sounded at the doorway. Before Henry could reply, the door burst open. Henry, Madam Oak, stormed in, her gold headscarf swaying. Right behind her came Chief Oak, his steps slower but his face carved from iron. Henry's brow tightened. "Papa, Mama, you did not announce yourself." "We don't need to announce to our own son," Madam Oak snapped. "What is this nonsense we heard, that you disgraced us by attending that," she spat the words, "that motherless Barbie's gathering?" Henry sat still, he didn't deny it. Chief Oak's deep voice rumbled over hers. "Not only did you attend, Henry, but people are saying you clapped like a fool while a maid ran the show. Tell me it is a lie. Tell me my son hasn't reduced the Oak name to ashes in front of half of Aba." Henry leaned back, his heart pounded hard but his face held calm. "It was not ashes, Papa, it was light, light those children needed, and Amara gave it to them." The room trembled with silence. Madam Oak gasped, her eyes flashing. "Listen to how you speak her name. Amara, Amara, as if she is your equal. She is a maid, Henry, nothing more. She cleans your floors, scrubs your toilet, picks crumbs from your table. And you, the son of Chief Oak, sit here talking as if she is royalty. God forbid." Henry rose slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the room. His voice cut through her tirade. "Enough, Mama." She froze. She had never heard that edge of steel in her son's voice before. Henry's gaze shifted to his father. "Yes, I attended the fundraiser. Yes, I clapped. Not like a fool, Papa, but like a man who recognized truth when he saw it. You ask me if I disgrace the Oak name. I say no. It is you who disgrace it, when you sit on your wealth doing nothing while children sleep hungry in this same city." Chief Oak stiffened, furious. "You dare talk back to me, boy, to your own father?" "I dare," Henry replied tightly, "because for once I have something real worth defending." "And what is that, Madam Oak demanded. "That maid." Henry's jaw clenched. Every memory of Amara's face at the home, her touch with the children, her tears at the dining table, all of it surged through him. He lifted his chin. Yes, that Maid. The word sent shock across the room like a bomb. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the faint hum of a generator outside. Then Madame Oak hissed, her voice trembling with fury. So you confess openly that a common maid has bewitched you? Chink, Henry, this is madness. Henry's voice lowered but sharpened, steady as a blade. It is not madness, Mama, it is clarity. For years I have dined with governors' daughters, senators' wives, oil barons. None of them touched me. None of them moved me. But one maid with nothing in her pockets and holes in her slippers shook my heart until I could no longer pretend. That maid, Amara, made me see humanity again. His parents stared at him in horror, as if he had cursed their lineage in plain sight. Do you even hear yourself? Chief Oak finally thundered. We built legacy, we built empire, and you want to scatter it because a maid smiles at you and feeds dirty children. Henry, don't throw away the oak throne for a gutter girl. Henry's eyes darkened. He stepped closer to his father, his voice softer now but lethal. Papa, if empire means nothing without compassion, then it is already dust. Amara is not a gutter girl. She is the strongest woman I have met in my life, and I will not let you or anyone reduce her to less than what she is worth. Madame Oak's breath caught in rage. Over my dead body will that girl sit inside this family. Henry's jaw firmed. Then, Mama, prepare your heart, because over my body she will. The statement fell like thunder. Silence filled the room, thick, suffocating. Chief Oak's face coloured with fury. Madame Oak raised her hand as if to strike Henry, but dropped it midair, realizing he was no longer a boy to command. Finally, with a hiss, she gathered her wrapper. Do what you want, Henry, but you will regret it. Our son dancing after a maid. God in heaven, shame. They stormed out of the mansion, their voices echoing through the hallways. Henry stood alone, his chest heaving. For the first time, he had openly turned his back on his parents' judgment. His heart throbbed with fear, but beneath it, a new kind of freedom flickered. That night, Henry drove again to St. Teresa's. Amara was there, her dress plain as always, her laughter light as she helped tie a child's shoelaces. She looked up when she saw him, surprise flashing in her eyes. You came, she said softly. Henry nodded, his throat raw. I told my parents about us. Her face paled. Us. Yes, Henry whispered, steady and broken all at once. I told them you are the woman I admire, the woman I respect. They raged, they cursed. But for the first time, Amara, I don't care. For once I am choosing with my heart, not fear. Her hands trembled, but her eyes searched his face. Henry, this road isn't easy. You could lose your family, your status. Then let me lose them, he cut in fiercely. But I will not lose the only truth that has touched me in years. I saw you when you thought no one did. And Amara, I cannot ever look away again. Her lip trembled, a tear sliding down her cheek. She shook her head, caught between fear and longing. Henry. He reached out, his palm hovering just an inch from her hand, trembling, desperate. Don't push me away again, please. The children nearby giggled, tugging her dress, breaking the tension. Amara wiped her tears quickly, smiling down at them, but her heart screamed silently inside her chest. Henry stood still, his hand finally dropping to his side. He had done the unthinkable, defied his parents, declared his heart, but the battle for Amara's trust had just begun. And he knew the final choice would not be his alone. The night in Aba buzzed outside with buses honking and hawkers shouting. But inside St. Teresa's, under the dim light of lanterns, two souls stood at a crossroads, love rising between them, but shadows of family and society tightening around them. One step further, and their lives would never be the same. The evening air over Aba was warm, heavy with the smell of roasted corn drifting from nearby streets. Inside the walls of St. Teresa's motherless Barbie's home, preparations were underway for something bigger than anyone had expected. Henry had made a decision. He would no longer hide. If Amara would allow him, he would stand with her, not as her master, not as her savior, but as her partner. The compound buzzed. Volunteers moved tables, children carried paper decorations, and a small band rehearsed Igbo folk songs on wooden drums. But at the center of it all stood Amara Okoye, her face tired yet glowing as she directed the preparations. When Henry walked into the courtyard, heads turned, people whispered. The hotel Billionaire had come again. Some bowed respectfully, others simply gaped in surprise. but Henry's eyes searched only for one person. Amara looked up from tying ribbons to a pole, their eyes locked. Silence filled the space between them, carrying every unspoken word from the past weeks. Slowly, she walked toward him. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "Then where else should I be?" Henry replied, his tone plain but heavy. "Everywhere else feels empty if you're not there." Her lips trembled, but she steadied herself. "Your parents called me names. Your mother looked at me like I belonged in the gutter. If you keep coming here, Henry, you risk dividing your house forever." Henry's chest heaved as he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "My house without truth is already divided, Amara. If choosing you means losing family power, then I would rather hold poverty with you than riches without you." Her breath caught and a tear slipped down. But before she could answer, a voice cut through sharply behind them. "Henry." Chief Oak's booming voice. His white senator robe swept into the compound, Madam Oak marching beside him in bright lace. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Parents of children, neighbors, and even the little ones froze. "Papa," Henry greeted, his body stiff. "What foolishness is this?" Madam Oak snapped, her voice slicing the air. "So it is true, Henry. Abar is telling the story already. The son of Chief Oak throwing away legacy for an orphan maid." Gasps spread again. Spectators shifted uncomfortably. Henry's jaw clenched, but before he could speak, Amara stepped forward, her voice trembling yet strong. "Enough, Mama, Papa, if that is how you wish to see me, then let it be. Yes, I was a maid. I scrubbed the floors of your mansion, washed plates, cooked food. But I am also the girl who carried home children abandoned at the gutter. I am the one who gave them my bread, though it was all I had. If that makes me less, then so be it." Her voice cracked, but she stood tall, eyes burning with dignity. "For years I thought I was invisible," she continued, her words trembling into strength, "but these children saw me. They hugged me. They called me Auntie Amara because they knew love, not pride. If you think I am not worthy of Henry, maybe Henry deserves better than pride itself." The courtyard erupted in whispers, but Henry's chest surged with fire. He stepped beside her, his voice firm and echoing. "You heard her, Papa, Mama. This is the woman I choose, the one who gave me vision when wealth blinded me. You say she is small, a maid. Then believe me when I say it is the maid who taught the billionaire how to be a man again." The silence crashed heavy. Chief Oak's face twitched, anger and disbelief wrestling for space. For a moment it seemed he would lash out, but Madam Oak grasped his arm. "Enough," she hissed, shame burning her cheeks. "Leave this place." And together they stormed out. Henry watched them go, his shoulders heavy but his chest unbroken. For the first time in his life he had defied the throne of his family. He turned to Amara, but her face was pale. "Henry," she whispered, shaking, "you've just torn yourself from them." "Then let it be torn," he answered simply. "Some bonds are chains." Her tears spilled freely now, but behind them a trembling smile began to grow. "Do you mean this, even after everything?" Henry stepped closer, his voice firm, his eyes locked on hers. "Amara Okoye, I mean every word. I do not want to walk my life half-blind anymore. With you, I see." Her lips parted, trembling. Finally, she whispered the words she had buried for weeks. "Then if you will stand, I will not run again." The children clapped as if heaven itself had told them what had passed. Some cheered and sang Amara's name loudly. The whole compound seemed to breathe new fire. Days later, the most extraordinary moment came. A wooden sign was unveiled at the newly repainted gate. In bright paint, it read, "The Amara Okoye Children's Home, in partnership with the Oak Foundation." Henry stood beside her as neighbors clapped and children danced barefoot in the dust. Amara wiped her eyes as Henry leaned close and whispered, "You gave them your name, now let me add mine, not above yours but beside it." For once, pride did not stand in her heart, only joy. And that evening, as the sun dipped across Abar's skyline, Amara turned to him. "I used to think I was born only for silence, Henry, cleaning one corner, vanishing into the dark. But you reminded me I could carry light outside those walls." Henry smiled faintly. "And you reminded me all my mansions were empty if I never carried people in them." She looked at the children running, chasing, laughing like bells across the courtyard. Then she whispered, almost in awe, "We are building something bigger than love, Henry. We are building legacy." He nodded gently. "Yes, but love will not be missing." Their hands met for the first time where everyone could see, simple but sure. And the courtyard erupted again. The final applause was not only for them, but for the truth their story carried. Dignity belongs to the heart, not the pocket. As Aba City's night spread its stars over them, Amara and Henry knew this was not the end, but the beginning. A new beginning where a maid became more than a shadow, and a billionaire became more than a name. Together they had found what both had lost, the courage to see with the